This is my 1998 Range Rover 2.5 DSE that sadly was left abandoned here in Ireland for over 5 years. But now I'm bringing it back to its former glory, one video at a time. Known to be a troublesome machine even when well maintained, this is definitely going to challenge all of my mechanical and electrical fault finding skills to the max.
Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Sam's Motor and Machine. Now in a previous episode in this series I showed you guys this 1998 Range Rover P38 that I bought, and I showed you all the faults that I found with this car. I titled this series the Abandoned Range Rover P38 project because this car really had been abandoned and it had been off the road for at least 5 or 6 years now. Now one of the most obvious issues that you guys will have seen if you've seen those previous episodes is a horrible noise that this car makes when it's running at idle. That horrible noise, as I uncovered, was caused by the crank pulley, or the crank damper, which is located on the front of the engine down low here. And in this episode we're going to change out that crank damper for a good used one, as well as a new alternator and loads of other jobs as well. So let's get started. Now today's video is an exciting one, and it's not just because we're going to be tearing into this BMW 2.5 diesel here finally. It's actually because this episode is the first episode of Sam's Motor and Machine that's actually sponsored. Now the goal of my videos has always been to entertain you guys, but hopefully along the way you've learned quite a bit about how we can maintain these cars and keep them on the road ourselves. And it's for that reason that I'm really proud to announce that this video is sponsored by Skillshare.
Skillshare is an online learning community where your membership gives you access to literally thousands of classes where you can begin to learn pretty much any skill you can imagine. It's the perfect place to fuel your curiosity and learn how to achieve your DIY, creative and technical goals. The first class I jumped into was this Arduino programming course called Crazy About Arduino by Aidan Gabrielli. If you're anything like me, you'll have loads of ideas about things you could do with an Arduino or Raspberry Pi, if only you knew how to program it and build a circuit like this. Arduinos are, after all, a very cheap and effective way to run our projects. And so far from this Crazy About Arduino course, I've managed to write a program and create this simple circuit that you can see running here. Eventually, I'm planning to use this new skill to create a fully functioning air suspension controller for the Project 130 out there. That'll be featured in a future video. And this is so exciting for me because it opens up so many avenues about projects that I thought I'd never be able to do, but now they feel like they're within my grasp. What was really great about Skillshare is the really short, well-structured episodes that make it really easy to stay in the zone, and also a complete lack of adverts, so again, nothing to take you out of the zone when you're trying to learn. So if you'd be interested in picking up a new skill to help conquer your own dream projects, the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So I wanted to say a really big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. It's really going to help out a lot with the restoration, renovation of this fantastic old P38 Range Rover, as well as my other projects. And it means that I can make even better and more exciting videos for you guys in the future. Anyway, with that said, let's get stuck into this P38 engine bay. So the L322 is not the subject of today's video, but it is serving as a pretty good bench. Hey Lucy, come here. Lucy, come here. Nope. Now this is just some of the parts that I've actually ordered for the P38 as part of this restoration process. As you can see here, we've got a full set of brakes, new pads, all the rebuild bits for the calipers as well, so that's going to be a future video. We've also got all of our filters for a full service, including oil filter, fuel filter, cabin filters, and I've got all the fluids for it as well. But today the main focus of this work is going to be this, which is the crankshaft damper or crankshaft pulley. So as you guys can see, this is a second-hand item. It came from Anton in Sligo, where you guys saw me go to his yard in the first video. However, as you guys can see, the rubber part of it, which is the part that gives it the flex for the damping action, is actually in very good condition. There's no cracks in it or anything like that, so this should be good to go. We've also got this, which is a refurbed alternator, because the one on there is not charging the battery, so hopefully this will sort that issue out for us. And while we're in the engine bay, we're also going to be fitting a new water pump, as well as new belts, and probably throw on this new top hose as well. So yeah, plenty to do. Let's make a start. Yeah, start taking out these fixings for the grille, which look pretty new actually. Looks like they've probably been replaced. There we go. Oh, giant spider in there, wow. Don't think this guy's too happy about me taking his home away. Probably gonna have to move you, mate. To be honest, it's probably just as well that I'm doing this, because it looks like it could all do with a good blast out anyway. This certainly makes a nice change to work on compared to the L322.
This is kind of from an era of cars where they were almost designed to be worked on by the owners, so it's a little bit easier to take everything apart. Now this unit at the front here is our aircon condenser, and as you guys can see, it's looking pretty crispy. It's had a bit of a whack on top there at some point, and in general the fins are very kind of corroded and not looking their best. Now I highly doubt the aircon actually works on this car. It's almost certainly all leaked out from somewhere over the years, but at some point it would be nice to try and reinstate this aircon, so maybe I'll see if we can try and get a replacement aircon condenser for it, because I think this is definitely going to be past its best. So next I'm going to see if we can get the viscous fan out of the way, and then once that's out of the way I might see if I've actually got enough space to get that crank pulley off without taking the rad pack out, because as you guys might have seen when I did that on Anton's car, a lot of the connections to the aircon condenser and the oil cooler did not want to come out, so they were really seized on, and I had to end up cutting the pipes to get it out. So try and avoid that if we can. So I've got my viscous fan spanner in here, which is using the 32mm end, and I'm just going to try and basically counter hold the pulley with my spanner, with my screwdriver, sorry, and then we're going to go clockwise with the spanner, because of course this is a reverse thread. There we go. I should have done it. So now I've just got to wind this off. So with the fan out of the way, next thing I'm going to do is actually get these belts off, which you guys can see here on my GoPro. They're looking very, very cracked and old, so in fact I could probably just cut them off because they're not going to go back on again. But we'll try and use the tensioner just to see how that works, make sure that's got the right spring on it and everything like that. So I'm actually going to have to use a screwdriver underneath the tensioner, like that, just to release that belt tension and then pop the belt off somewhere, so I'll do that instead. There we go. Pop the belt off on the alternator pulley, so now we should be able to go around, pull this belt out and get it out of the way. And you guys can see this belt is definitely past its best. When you look on the inside there, you can see all of those lovely cracks. Pretty old. Okay, now that belt's off, we can truly see just how worn that crank pulley is. The damper, sorry. You can see how much movement there is in that. And that is our noise that's been causing that horrible rattling noise while the engine's been running. So there we go, confirmed. So the crank damper has 6 13mm nuts on it, which hopefully you guys can see there on the GoPro. When I did it on one at Anton's, I used a impact gun on this, so they flew off, but hopefully we'll be able to get it with our long 3/8 ratchet and a 13mm socket, so we'll give that a go now. Apologise in advance if you can't see anything. So that one was loose. So that's all the bolts out. We've just got to hope the crank damper comes off now without too much effort. I think it's going to require some tappage. There we go, guys. Got a bit of hammering later. It's finally about ready to come off. He says, still a bit wedged. So it looks like we just got another part to replace. As I was fiddling around in the engine bay just then, the front part of the tensioner actually snapped off of the tensioner itself. So you guys can see on the part that's fallen off there, this casting has completely failed. So we're going to have to replace the tensioner before this engine can be run again, really, unfortunately. Which is a bit of a pain in the ass, but yeah, way she goes sometimes. So yeah, this broken belt tensioner actually might stop us in our tracks this weekend of getting this thing back running again, which is a bit unfortunate because I kind of wanted to get it all done this weekend and have it all in one video for you guys. So I've sent Anton a message, the guy up in Sligo that you guys might remember, and we're going to see if he's got one of these in stock or on one of his engines that he can let me buy off him, because it would be good to get this all back together again this weekend rather than having to wait for parts to arrive for ages. So yeah, a bit of a bugger, but it's one of those things that happens when you're working on cars. Anyway, with all that out of the way, we can now finally get the crank damper out, which is the whole point of this exercise. And there it is, well, half of it anyway. So we've got the two halves of the crank damper that you guys can see there. These are supposed to do one part. This is supposed to fit over the centre part like that, and then this rubber part's meant to be bonded to the centre here, but as you guys can see, it's completely separate. So I just spoke to Anton, and luckily he does have the parts that we need in order to replace those tensioner bits that broke. The only bit that's actually broken is the plug that goes in the end. I'll put up the Land Rover parts diagram on the screen right now so you can have a look. But yeah, my plan is now I'm going to go and head down to Anton's either tonight or first thing tomorrow morning to go and get those bits so we can get this running again this weekend, so you guys can see it in this video. So that's the plan. So thankfully Anton's actually got the parts that we need for the tensioner, so I'm going to head up there now and go and collect them. He's got a few other bits for me as well for the Range Rover, which are other bits and bobs for other parts of the project we're going to need later on, so I might as well go and make a trip up there. It is about an hour and a half's drive, but I just want to get all the parts together so we can get this Range Rover back running again this weekend, just so you guys have got a video to watch. So yeah, that's the lengths I go to make sure that you guys have got something to watch. Anyway, I'm going to pack all the cameras up, head up there now, and the next time you see me will probably be tomorrow morning when I'm back working on this again. So I'll catch you guys in a bit. So here we are guys, day 2 of fixing the P38 Range Rover. I've got my new parts now from Anton. This is all the bits that we actually needed. What had happened basically is this plug which holds on the arm for the tensioner had snapped off, the end of it snapped off, so the thread is still stuck in the barrel of the other one, and there's nothing to stop the tensioner arm from actually coming off. So this is kind of just like a boss that it rides on. So all I've got to do is screw this into the front of the engine, put our arm on, tighten up the cap, and it'll be good to go. Yeah, it should be nice and lubricated on there. Lovely. And this cap is basically the only thing that holds on the arm onto the shaft. Like that. You can hear that lovely greasy sound in there, that's what you want. So there is our arm now fitted onto the nice freshly lubed shaft, everything torqued up. Now all we've got to do is actually add the tensioner itself, which is like a little damper that goes between here and a bracket up the top there. So yeah, happy days. Right, so before we put that new tensioner together, it's time to drop in our good used crank pulley, which is the whole reason we're doing this in the first place. So with this, there is a dowel pin that you've got to align with the crankshaft. It'll only go on one way, so just make sure you get that right, and then it should just basically drop into place and push back onto the crankshaft itself. The pin is at the very bottom of the crankshaft, so we'll just get our dowel pin lined up, drop this guy in. And that looks like it's gone straight on. So here's a little tip for you guys. Because I can't quite get my head down there to make sure that pin's gone in, I just use my phone to take a quick picture. And I can see from looking at this that the pin is aligned and all the bolt holes are aligned as well. So it's a nice little tip. You can use your smartphone to stick it in places where you can't stick your head. Okay, let's whack them in. Just makes them that little bit easier to start, and that bit of lube on there. So there is a torque setting for these, which is about 23 Newton meters, which isn't very much, but my 3/8 torque wrench is out of action at the moment, so we're just going to wind these on by hand. So we've just got to put a bolt back through now for the lower part of the tensioner itself. So the next job we're going to do is actually replace this water pump, just as a matter of course while we're in here, especially on these BMW diesels, which have a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a kettle. I mean, they're not that bad, but they do have somewhat of a reputation for overheating. So I think while we're in here, definitely a good idea to throw this in. Now there isn't actually a gasket as such on this. We've just got this one big O-ring here, and then a smaller O-ring further back, just as you guys can see there. So we'll pull that one off, clean up the mating faces, throw this guy on, and we should be good to go. Now this pump does have a slightly interesting method for extracting it from the engine. Guys might be able to see there's two tapped M6 holes on either side here, and what we're going to do is basically thread an M6 bolt into these on each side, and as we do that it's going to press on the inside against the mating face, and that will push the pump out and help us withdraw it from the engine. So on the new pump, all I'm going to do is just put a very light smear of grease around this O-ring, and also try and get a little bit on that O-ring in there, just to ease it into place, as we obviously know it's fairly tight going into that recess on the engine. So you probably should use Vaseline on this really, but I don't have any of that handy. But this will do the job just fine. And this is a Febby Bilstein replacement pump, so it's not genuine, but it's a good make. And I'm expecting to have to sort of wind this back in with the bolts, because it was such a tight pull to get it out. That's what we'll do. We'll just use the bolts to gently wind it back in again. Always helps a bit when you're going into alloy as well to use a bit of grease, because the alloy can be a bit kind of bindy. It can kind of grip on the bolts as they're going in. It makes it sometimes a bit tricky. So yeah, we'll go in with a bit of lube to help us. And these, I've not looked what the torque setting is for these, but it'll probably be in a very, very low torque, because it's only little M6 bolts going into a alloy housing, aluminium housing, so you'll be very careful with these not to strip them. So next job I think is going to be to throw on this nice refurbished alternator. I did manage to find a longer top bolt for it, because the one I took out was a bit too short, so that's that sorted. And yeah, once we've got this on, throw the belts on, chuck some coolant in, and I think that'll be it. So, Alti going in. And what I'm going to do actually, make it nice and easy on myself, is hang it from this top bolt first, because it's really nice and accessible. We'll wind that in. Not tight just yet. We'll grab our bottom bolt, slide him in, and then this one's a little bit more tricky to access with a tool being underneath, but not too bad. Yeah, the more I look around this car, the easier it looks to work on. See, I've got my nice oil filter right in front of me just here, and then just down there I can see the starter motor, which again is really nice and accessible. That'll be a 5-minute job to change that, which is just a really nice thing to have. When you compare it to something like the L322 there, the 4.4 TDV8, it's a completely different world in terms of home maintenance. I'm going to drop the belt over the crank to start us off. Through there, over the water pump and fan, like that, and then she wants to go under the power steering. I'm going to leave it off the alternator for now, put it round this tensioner, basically like that. Just make sure everything's lined up. So guys, new crank damper, new water pump, new tensioner arm, new alternator, new drive belt, and there we go. Right, next job, fan and fan shroud. Right, so these guys are going to have to go on at the same time and be lowered into position. So I want the fan facing that way, shroud facing this way. Oh, not not too much in there. Happy days. Now, slot our fan in this hole. And there we go. It's not sitting, actually. Let's just get this down in position. There we go. Finally. Onto the hub, and we're going to turn it. Which way we're going to go? Anti-clockwise. There we go. That's that started. So there we go. That's the fan back on again, and the new shroud. So now I'm going to put all the hoses back on again, top up the coolant, and I think that probably calls for a time lapse. Let's go. So there we go, engine bay's all back together again. I've just topped up the coolant with water for now because we're going to do a full coolant flush on this at some point as well, and we're putting all new fresh fluids in it. So hopefully the battery's got enough power in it to crank her over, because obviously the alternator's not been charging it so far. So I think the only thing I have to do now is give it a start. Let's do it. All right, let's go for it. Come on, battery, you can do it. Yes! Oh, listen to it. It's so much better than it was. Oh, listen to that glorious M51, guys. That sounds so much nicer. Right, next important test. Let's see if it's charging. Right, multimeter out. There you go, guys, 14 volts. Happy days. Now, that probably means a lot of the electronics on the Range Rover are going to be a lot happier now that they've got the correct voltage being supplied than they were before. So, opens up a whole new world of possibilities. It does sound quite loud, the viscous fan, when it's revving. I'm not sure whether that's normal or not, but possible that that clutch on that fan is possibly a bit stiff. But yeah, overall, really happy with the outcome of today's work. Got rid of that horrible clacking noise by changing that pulley over. Got the new alternator on there, which is charging perfectly. We've got our rebuilt tensioner, which is working as it should be now. New belt on there as well, and the car is sounding really nice and sweet, so I'm really happy with that.
I couldn't be happier with how sweet the old 2.5 BMW lump is sounding now. The new alternator means we've got the right voltage going to all of our electronics, so in the next P38 episode we'll start digging into the air suspension and ABS problems and see if we can solve them with the Nanocom. That's going to be about it for now though, guys. Don't forget to claim your Skillshare trial using the link down below, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, whack that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.